It is important that we realize that the money that Russia and China raises from raiding the resources of Zimbabwe does not go to sophisticate global trade or improving the economy of the world. No, it goes to funding their war against the West, their war against the free world, their war against all of us. The freedom of all the citizens of around the world are threatened by the China and the Russian invasion of African countries like Zimbabwe. In Ukraine, they've started their war, but in Africa, the war is down through proxies. They are they're using Africa as a place where they accumulate resources. That is why Zimbabwe is pillaged the way it is. Because you would say that corrupt Zimbabweans would run a government corruptly, but they will still have a heart for fellow Zimbabweans. But Emerson Mnangagwa seems to be heartless. It is because of the people that are backing him up. The Chinese and the Russians are not interested in the economy of Zimbabwe. They're interested in the wealth of the country so that they can pile up their stocks against the West. So there is multiple avenues that they are using this thing for. Uh, well, one is financial. When they steal resources, there's a financial gain that they can use to arm themselves up. Number two is the control of the resources that are found in Southern Africa and the rest of the African region. We are seeing that we are seeing the Russian paramilitary group, Wagner group, all over the Western Africa and North Africa. And we are seeing China expanding its global influence in South America and the Caribbean, Africa, and the rest of the other emerging economies. All this is a plan so that they can build this control. You see, these loans that Chinese give to these governments, these are predatory loans, these debt traps, are to trap these countries in a place where they can be controlled by China, and therefore China controlling the resources of those nations. As you can see that these regions have got critical resources. For example, in the Southern African region, as we're entering into uh, the next artificial intelligence economy, how do you call it, the fourth industrial revolution, we will see that rare earths, battery technologies, has got the resources that emanate from Zimbabwe, the Congo, this whole Southern African region. So for China to win against the West, they also not only need to have money, but also have the control of those resources and be able to block the Western world access to these resources, so that they can create this global hegemony led by China and Russia, and it will lead to a global autocracy. And I mean, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be a disaster for everyone. And shame on all those people that support Russia and China thinking that they're our friends. They are not. You are being fooled. These people are building up a war against the whole world. They are preparing for World War III. They are preparing for Armageddon. And these evil men, you can see that birds of the same feather fly together. These evil men like Itim Nangagwa, Vladimir Putin, Lushenko, what is name that president from Belarus, uh, whatever his name is, them, you can see that these are a group of men that are evil, heartless, and you do not want those men running the world. You understand? The free world, which is the Western world, is a world that is built on democracy and pro human rights. Men themselves might be evil, but the system does not allow them to be evil. The system does not allow the US president, who is the most powerful man in the world, to do as he pleases willy nilly. The system of the free world will stop him from that. However, the system of the Chinese and the Russians means that whoever is got power, whoever is the most violent of us all, will rule. Just like in Zimbabwe, the most violent Zimbabwean is Emerson Mnangagwa. Hence, he is leading. Even if they will have wars in ZANU-PF, the one who will take over power will be the most violent one. So that kind of system, you will see that we will have the most violent men ruling the world. And the most violent man is not obviously going to be loving to the world. There's going to be rapid corruption, income inequality, and poverty. That and they don't care at all. The way, and that's why I'm judging the Chinese in Zimbabwe. The way that the Chinese the Chinese and Russian led hegemony over Zimbabwe shows me that they do not care about the country in which they invest in. If China and Russia wants to tell me that they've got good intentions in Zimbabwe, I'll ask them the question: how come you do not care about the economy of Zimbabwe? Because one of the things that they will say, well, if we are not China, pro-China and Russian, we want to the country to fall under USA, the imperialist. That's just nonsense. Look at the countries that are in line with the United States. Look at South Korea. The economy is doing well. Look at Taiwan. The economy is doing well. Look at Japan itself that joined the United States after the war with America. America restored Japan. I mean, even China itself that is now growing horns. It was the United States itself that took China out of the doldrums of poverty. It was United States, uh, the American plan that brought about the Marshall Plan that brought about success in Europe, Germany, France, you name it. So as you can see that the US hegemony is not built on oppression, but it is built on partnerships that bring prosperity both for the United States and the countries that are in line with the United States. You will see that the countries that fail in the world are countries that are fighting with the United States, countries that want to be rebel, rebel nations that want to align themselves with the Skrundels, which is the Russians and the Chinese. It's these countries that fail. China has succeeded because of aligning with USA, but because they've succeeded now, they are beginning to grow horns and begin to take after Russia. You see, Russia has always been a rock state. I mean, except through the time of Gorbachev, who teared down the wall and put an end to this Soviet Union block of countries and brought freedom, brought capitalism to the Soviet Union itself. But Vladimir Putin wants to reverse the gains of the nations the former Soviet states have gained from participating in the global capitalism. But now Russia and Vladimir Putin specifically wants to reverse all of those gains. To understand, together with China, as I have said, that China is a country that benefited from the global capital since the late 1970s. It was US capital that propelled China to the global stage where it is. But then again, now the Chinese CCP is turning around and beginning to rebel against US capital, and we're seeing them aligning themselves with a Putin to spread their venom around the world, working with the weak of the African leaders who are willing to put their people under the bus just for one buck. Emerson Mnangagwa and the people that are running ZANU-PF today are the weak link in Zimbabwe who have allowed themselves, who have prostituted themselves with the enemies of the people, which is the Chinese and the Russians, in stealing rapidly the resources of the nation of Zimbabwe. As I said, through that Zimbabwe defense industries, they are stealing and looting, and all of that thing is not accounted for. And profits are largely accruing to the Chinese and the Russian coffers even more than ATM Mnangagwa and his cronies. So therefore, I can safely say that Emerson Mnangagwa is captured. We have got we have got a capture of the state in Zimbabwe. The whole sovereignty of the country has been captured. This capture in Zimbabwe is worse than the one of Jacob Zuma, because this one, even our military itself is captured. Our institutions, our courts are captured by the Chinese through Emerson Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF itself is languishing. Here's the thing. If ZANU-PF was a political party, we listen to this point. I want to bring out a very important point. If ZANU-PF was a party that only cares about ZANU-PF people, at least we will see development in ZANU-PF members, and everybody will join ZANU-PF and everyone will succeed. But no, ZANU-PF members are suffering. Okay, the war veterans are suffering. Do you know why? Because Emerson Mnangagwa is no longer working for ZANU-PF. Emerson Mnangagwa and his cronies are working for the Chinese and the Russians, who are stealing even from ZANU-PF. So which means that they have captured the name of ZANU-PF has been captured. So Kana, if you're a ZANU-PF member, know very well that ZANU-PF is captured by the Chinese and the Russians to steal from you. ZANU-PF is no longer saving you, not because ZANU-PF as an organization hates its own children, but because ZANU-PF as an organization has been captured, and your leader Emerson Mnangagwa, you in ZANU-PF, for the sake of the country, you need to get rid of Emerson Mnangagwa. Within the structures of ZANU-PF, you need to begin to prosecute Mnangagwa using the points that I've been giving you, so that we begin to free our national institutions. I'm not a ZANU-PF member, but the ZANU-PF itself, which is an organization, a political organization in Zimbabwe that brought about liberation, has been captured by the Chinese and the Russians for the interest of the Chinese and the Russians, and that bothers me. It should bother you if you're in ZANU-PF. It should bother you even if you're in the opposition, because it means that when you're opposing with ZANU-PF, you're no longer opposing with fellow Zimbabweans, but rather you are opposing with China and Vladimir Putin, who are hell-bent at stealing from you, who are hell-bent at destroying the institution of ZANU-PF, so that it stops saving the interests of war veterans. Why are the war veterans suffering? Why are the war veterans screaming? Their children are suffering. Why? Why are the ZANU-PF structures impoverished? It is because ZANU-PF itself has been captured by the Russians and the Chinese. So you see how deep this capture, this Russian and Russian and Chinese led capture has been in Zimbabwe. So you see our leading political party has been captured, our military has been captured, our intelligence has been captured, our court system, the judges themselves, has got no power whatsoever, because they are afraid of this huge military alliance between the Zimbabwe military and the Russian and Chinese military. So you begin to see that the people of Zimbabwe have got very little space to breathe, if if this global superpower, because China is number 2 in the world military, and Russia is up there. He's an active guy who's fighting everybody left, right, and center. Therefore, you see that as an ordinary Zimbabwean with no power, with no weapon, with no military experience, it makes it clear, it makes sense to me that as the Zimbabweans, we begin now to make our own military alliances, because we no longer have a military. Our military has been captured. Even the people that are in the Zimbabwean military himself, I mean, our soldiers need to learn and understand that the institution that they are part of is now being captured, and therefore they must begin to mutiny. Okay, refuse to follow the Chinese and Russian orders, but to follow orders that serve and put forward the interests of the nation of Zimbabwe first. If you're a soldier in the Zimbabwe military, you need to realize now, soldier, that we are at war already. Listen very careful to me, soldiers of Zimbabwe. Wars do not always involve guns or fighting in the mountains. Wars sometimes are wars of intelligence, wars of the economy, wars of the currency, wars of our politics. Right now, the soldiers of Zimbabwe are used by the Chinese and the Russians. As you are taking orders as a soldier, thinking that the orders you are taking are for the sovereignty of the nation. No, the orders that you are taking are actually acting against yourself and your own personal gain and the gain of the whole country. So it is important now that the intelligence of our military, I mean, the intelligence that is interested in building Zimbabwe, not the intelligence that has been captured by the Chinese, need to figure out a way out of this capture by the Chinese. Same goes apply to other institutions in the country. They need to begin to think about how they can free themselves from this Chinese and Russian threat. In fact, it's very easy. It's revolt. A revolt against Idi Mnangagwa's government that is taking orders from China and Russia to destroy the whole world. Revolt and form up alliances that will say no and leave Mnangagwa alone. Isolate Mnangagwa and Zimbabwe. Reason being, Mnangagwa is the #1 enemy of the state, together with Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping and the CCP. Make alliances with the US military, with NATO, with the British intelligence. Make alliances with the FBI, with the CIA, and all the agencies of the free world, so that Zimbabwe can be free from the clashes of China and Russia. Because if we do not know that, if we do not do that, it's not only Zimbabwe that goes down. As Zimbabwe goes down, so does Europe goes down, so does the American, so does USA go down. So for Zimbabwe's freedom to arise, it means the freedom for Europe and the safety of the Americans as well. So this really is a global threat. So Emerson Mnangagwa sits in the center of the global threat. What am I saying? I'm saying ED, Emerson Dambuzo Mnangagwa, is a threat to the free world as we know it. Therefore, coalition of forces of good around the world need to know that we need to do something, and we need to do something fast and aggressively against the threat, which is Idi Mnangagwa in Harare, which is a pillar of the bigger threat, which is Putin and the Chinese. Holy is God.